And congratulations to Jackie Dean.
I call Catherine Delahunty.
Right. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'll just take a brief call on this bill, which the Green Party is happy to be supporting. And I understand that Jackie Dean has worked hard to get it to this point, and I know that's an excellent effort. I would agree with Eugenie Sage that useful tinkering is one description. If we put it in the context of conservation as a whole, it's more like dancing on the deck of the Titanic. But in terms of conservation, the effect of the cuts that have taken place in conservation. So with those provisos, we do support this particular and very specific and valuable effort. I looked up how people do some of the smuggling, and it is quite fascinating. There is people who strap iguanas to their legs, people who are stopped at customs and asked, is that a snake in your pants, or are you just pleased to see me? There are people who are running baby shark smuggling rings out of churches. There are birds of paradise that have leapt out of suitcases at customs. There are leopards found in people's backpacks and monkeys down people's trousers. I mean, this is the international scene of $10 billion worth of endangered species smuggling. It's pretty bizarre stuff. Add that to it. Our own precious taonga, our own endangered species, are also smuggled in bizarre and interesting ways. And it's clearly a very bizarre group of people who make a lot of money out of ripping off our unique taonga. And our country, being even more unique in many ways, is vulnerable to those kind of very strange and depressing behaviours, which do need penalties, and we support the increase in the penalties. In the first reading speech, I talked about the sanctioned theft of the taonga of Aotearoa, which the member Claudia Hauti also referred to, and some of the historically sanctioned rip-offs that took place that fill the museums of the world, and I won't go on about that again. But I think it is important to remember that the greatest threat to our endangered species in Aotearoa is not smuggling, but pests and the loss of habitat. And on the conservation estate is clearly under great stress. So we welcome this measure to protect individuals, but like much of the government's programs, dealing with individual violations does not change structural and systemic violations. It doesn't change structural risks and collapses of species. And when you cut 400 jobs and rely on the market to do conservation, sorry, not you, Mr. Speaker, when the government does, there is a real problem, because the market is not consistent. The market is going to do what it feels like when it feels like it. The corporatisation of DOC will result in even less rigorous and consistent pest control. And the finest example of a bad policy is the proposal to mine the Denniston Plateau, where the two wonderful endangered species who are at risk from smuggling, the green gecko and the great spotted kiwi, just to name two, are at risk not because smugglers are rushing down there to find them, and one of these species was only found during a forest and bird bio-blitz last year, but this place is going to be turned into an open cast mine. Now that is conservation and heritage destruction. It is not going to be saved because we've put some penalties on smugglers. It's going to be lost because of government economic policy refusing to acknowledge the broader context in which this bill sits. And that's very, very disappointing, because smuggling is directly evil, but greenwashing is no better. And let's not pretend what's really going on when we talk about the biosecurity cuts, when we talk about the cuts to the RMA, the Crown Minerals Act, which, as Mona Maki said, has created joint decision-making on the DOC estate, putting more species at risk. All of those changes that the government has brought in the last few years, which put endangered species at high risk. And so we cannot replace a commitment at government level, at a state level and a community level to conservation with the privatisation of the DOC estate and expect that we will actually protect these species. However, we're happy to support the bill. We're glad that we've got to this point. I think that it's really important. These species are intrinsic to our identity. The mokomoko, the gecko, the narara, the reptiles, the manu and the marine life. We should be protecting them at every level. And this bill does a tiny little step forward. I welcome every step, but I would like to see the government drop their belief system that destroying the environment will support the economy. It's simply not true. Our environment is our economy, as indeed our endangered species. But I would just like to say that we support this bill in any way that it makes progress. We will support good things. We have always voted for things that are worthwhile, but we will not pretend this solves the problem of the conservation crisis that faces Aotearoa New Zealand right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
I call Tim McIndoe.
Mr. Speaker, it's a great honour for me to take the final call in this